Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are sifting through the wreckage of a game that I think gave every fan watching a serious case of emotional whiplash.
That is the perfect way to put it, whiplash.
We're looking at the Arizona Cardinals versus the Detroit Lions, Week 1 of Season 84. And I've got to say, if you just looked at the box score, specifically the passing numbers, without seeing the final result,
Oh, you'd think they won by 20. You'd be absolutely convinced.
you'd think they were planning the parade route.
Absolutely. The stat sheet tells one story, or a story of like incredible efficiency in these highlight reel plays, but the scoreboard tells a completely different, much more painful story.
And it ended 27-24, a Lions victory.
It did.
Right.
And you're right, the numbers on the page are almost, contradictory to the feeling of the loss. It's a paradox.
It really was a heartbreaker in the desert. You had this incredible electric aerial display that honestly looked like the future of the franchise had arrived early.
The air raid sirens were definitely going off.
They were. But then, on the flip side, you had a complete and total collapse of the running game.
Yeah.
And a second-half fade that was it was agonizing to watch.
It was the definition of a polarized performance, a tale of two different football teams showing up in the same uniform.
So our mission today is to dig into the why behind this. We want to determine if this passing success we saw is something sustainable, or if the lack of balance is a fatal flaw. I mean, honestly, I'm confused. How do you play that well through the air and still lose?
That is the million-dollar question. It's easy to get blinded by the flashiness of the quarterback play, and we will give him his flowers, but my role here is to drag us down into the trenches, into the mud, and look at the messy reality of why they actually lost.
Fair enough. But before we get muddy, I'm going to stay in the clouds for a minute. We have to start with Jack Weber.
Of course.
The narrative coming into this season was all about the quarterback of the future, right? And usually week 1, you expect some growing pains. You expect that deer in the headlights look.
You expect the game to move a little too fast for him. You expect some friction.
Right.
For him to look, well, young.
Exactly. But Weber, he looked like he's been in the league for 10 years. I was looking at the source material here, and the numbers are they don't look real. Jack Weber went 22 of 24 passing.
That number is staggering. It really is.
It's absurd. That is a 91% completion rate in a season opener. Let's just pause on that. In the NFL, completing 65% is good. 70% is elite. He was at 91.
He missed 2 throws the entire game. 2.
2. And this wasn't some preseason scrimmage against guys who are going to be bagging groceries next week. This was the Detroit Lions.
A team known for being physical and aggressive. To step into that and complete over 90% of your passes. That just shows a level of decision-making that is incredibly rare.
And it wasn't just dinking and dunking either. He threw for 219 yards, 2 touchdowns, and finished with a passer rating of 115.1. The notes call it poise and precision, and I think that's spot on.
What stands out to me about that stat line is the calmness it implies. When you're completing that high a percentage, it means you aren't forcing things. You're taking what the defense gives you. That is elite processing speed.
It felt like he knew where the ball was going before the snap. And this is where it gets really interesting for the fans. You can't have a completion percentage that high without someone on the other end catching it. The connection between Weber and Marvin Harrison Jr., oh my goodness.
It was immediate chemistry. It looked like they've been playing catch in the backyard since they were kids.
Harrison Jr. was the clear alpha out there. 6 catches, 67 yards, and he snagged both of Weber's touchdown passes.
And it's how he did it. There was one play mentioned, a long of 28 yards, where he just made the defenders look silly.
That's that massive catch radius he has. It turns, 50-50 balls into 80-20 balls.
And it makes the quarterback's job infinitely easier.
And while Harrison was the star, we saw Trey McBride and the rookie Tommy Davis chipping in too.
Which is crucial. You need those outlet valves. It shows he's going through his progressions, not just staring down his favorite target. That's a huge sign of maturity.
So we have a QB playing at a near-perfect level, a star receiver with 2 touchdowns, efficiency, 2 TDs, only 1 interception. I have to ask the provocative question here.
Go for it.
Does a traditional running game even matter anymore? If you can move the ball through the air like that, do you really need to grind it out on the ground?
I love the enthusiasm. I really do. But this is where I have to be the voice of reason, or maybe the wet blanket, and bring everyone back down to earth.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
The answer is yes. 1,000 times. Yes. You absolutely need a running game. In fact, this game is the perfect case study for why you can't win without one.
But 91% completion.
Yeah.
It feels like that should overcome anything.
It feels that way, but let's flip to the other side of the stat sheet. We raved about the passing. Now we have to look at the rushing numbers. And Brace yourself.
Okay.
The Cardinals rushed for 17 yards.
In the first half.
No. Total. For the entire game.
17 yards. That doesn't even sound possible for an NFL team. That sounds like a typo.
It's startling. 17 yards is a disaster. You simply cannot win consistently in this league with 17 yards of rushing offense. It makes you completely one-handed.
So how does that even happen? Is it the line? The backs?
It's a breakdown across the board. The O-line isn't getting a push, and Isaiah Pacheco, who's supposed to be this dynamic, angry runner,
Right.
he led the backfield with 6 carries for 12 yards.
2 yards a carry, you can fall forward for 2 yards.
Exactly. And crucially, he had a fumble. So not only was the production non-existent, there was a turnover. Bottled up is the phrase they use, and that's putting it mildly. They were erased.
Okay, so they couldn't run. But walk me through why that matters so much. If Weber's throwing lasers, how does that hurt the pass game?
Here's the problem with being one-dimensional. If the defense knows you cannot run the ball, and after a quarter, Detroit knew, they stop respecting it entirely.
So they just changed their whole strategy.
Completely. Linebackers don't have to step up. The defensive ends, they don't have to worry about contain. They can just pin their ears back and sprint right at the quarterback.
So it puts a giant target on Weber's back.
A huge target. It puts an immense amount of pressure on him. He has to be perfect on every single drop back because there's no safety valve on the ground to get a cheap 4 yards on first down.
So 3rd and long becomes your entire life.
It does. And eventually, against a good defense, that dam is going to break. It affects time of possession. It keeps your own defense on the field. And that brings us to the game flow, because this really was a tale of two halves.
It sure was. If you only watched the first half, you'd have thought the Cardinals were cruising. 10 points in the first quarter. They went into the locker room up 17-7.
And that 17-7 lead feels comfortable. You're up by 2 scores. You're feeling good.
But then the shift happened. And it was drastic. Detroit came out and just roared back 14 points in the third quarter alone.
The momentum swung completely. And why? Because Detroit adjusted. They likely said in the locker room, ignore the run, just cover the pass and hit the quarterback.
And then another 6 points for Detroit in the fourth. Meanwhile, the Arizona offense, the one that looked unstoppable, put up a goose egg.
0 points in the fourth quarter. That's the telltale sign of a one-dimensional team. The defense figured them out.
And when you need to burn the clock in the fourth to preserve a lead, you have to run the ball.
And Arizona couldn't, so they kept giving the ball back to Detroit.
That is such a key point. And while their offense stalled, let's talk about the other side of the ball. Because if the Cardinals' run game was a tragedy, the Lions' run game was a horror movie.
This connects directly to the bigger picture. We talked about Arizona having 17 yards. The Lions totaled 164 rushing yards.
Wow, 164-17, that's almost 10 times the production.
That is where the game was lost.
Yeah.
Forget the highlight reels for a second. Football is a game of physics. If one team pushes you backward for 164 yards and you can only push them for 17, you are losing that battle 99 times out of 100.
And Jahmyr Gibbs, he was an absolute nightmare.
A nightmare. Gibbs had 161 of those yards himself. I mean, think about that. One single player outgained the entire opposing team's rushing attack by nearly 150 yards.
And 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
He was finishing drives.
3 touchdowns. He was running through them, around them, over them. It demoralizes the defense. It's exhausting when you can't get off the field. Your legs get heavy.
It felt like every time they needed a stop, Gibbs would just rip off another chunk of yardage.
And that's tough because there were individual efforts that were good. Jalen Thompson had 8 tackles and a pass deflection. He was flying around.
He was everywhere.
He was. But run defense is a unit responsibility. If one guy loses his gap, the whole thing collapses. One guy cleaning up the mess doesn't solve the problem that the mess exists in the first place.
It really overshadowed those bright spots. But speaking of bright spots, and maybe false hope, we have to talk about the one play that gave everyone a heart attack.
The interception.
Zoff Frazier. A 77-yard interception return for a touchdown. That play was electric. The stadium must have gone absolutely nuclear.
It was a spectacular play, a 77-yard return. That's a highlight reel play for the rest of the season.
And watching it, I thought, that's it. That's the play that wins the game. When your defense scores for you like that, it's usually the dagger.
Usually, yes. But here's the issue, and again, I'm being the skeptic here. That play masked the underlying problems.
How so? It put points on the board.
It did, but it was a sugar rush. It felt great in the moment, but relying on your defense to score touchdowns is not a strategy. It's a lottery ticket.
So it was a Band-Aid on a bullet hole.
Precisely. It distracted from the fact that Jamar Gibbs was still gashing them. The pick six kept them in the game on the scoreboard, but it didn't solve the fact that Detroit was dominating the line of scrimmage. It didn't stop that slow bleed.
So incredible passing, a highlight reel defensive TD,
Yeah.
and they still lose 27-24 because they got bullied on the ground.
And because of the turnovers, we mentioned Pacheco's fumble, but Weber, despite his near-perfect game, did throw one interception.
Right, the one blemish.
And in a game decided by 3 points, those 2 turnovers are magnified. The lack of ball security combined with no run game is a recipe for losing tight contests.
So what does this all mean as they look ahead? They've got the Cleveland Browns next.
Which is not an easy matchup. Cleveland prides themselves on exactly what Arizona struggled with: physical defense and running the ball.
No, it's not a get-right game at all. So here's the debate. Can they bounce back? I look at that Weber to Harrison connection and I think, okay, that's a foundation. You're always in the game. I'm optimistic.
I admire your optimism, but I'm looking at the lines. If they go into the Browns game with the same plan, hoping Weber plays hero ball while the run game produces 17 yards, the Browns are going to exploit that exact same weakness.
You think Cleveland's just going to watch the tape and say, run right at them?
100%. That's how the NFL works. It's a copycat league. They will look at what Gibbs did and lick their chops. And on defense, Cleveland has a fierce pass rush. They'll pin their ears back and come after Weber.
That's a scary thought. If he's under siege, that 91% completion rate is going to drop fast.
Look, the Cardinals showed flashes of brilliance, but they have to get that run game going. It's not optional. If they don't, Weber's going to be running for his life.
It really does seem like the coaching staff has some sleepless nights ahead. The Ferrari engine is working, but the tires are flat.
And don't forget that fourth quarter scoring drought. That is a major red flag for me. You cannot put up a goose egg in crunch time and expect to win.
So to wrap this up, Lions 27, Cardinals 24. A loss that feels confusing because of how good Weber looked.
It's conflicting feelings. Hope because of the quarterback. That's the hardest piece to find. But deep, deep concern because of the trenches.
It leaves us with a pretty provocative thought to chew on. We always talk about the modern NFL being a passing league. But here, Jack Weber completed 91% of his passes. Almost unheard of, and they still lost. Does this prove that even now, you still need an old-school, gritty ground game to actually close out a victory?
I think the scoreboard answered that question for us today. You can fly as high as you want, but eventually you have to land the plane. And you need a runway to do that.
It certainly seems so. We'll be watching closely to see what adjustments they make against Cleveland. Thanks for diving in with us.
See you next time.